Oliver, brewmaster of Brooklyn Brewery. You are like the king of beer. You have done it all. You have written about beer. You are one of the world's most renowned brewmasters. You have tasted it, made it. You're like the Pope of beer. And to be here in your presence, this is a religious experience for me.
I would love to be infallible, but I'm afraid it doesn't quite work that way.
Oh, beer, it's okay. But
Brewmaster, though, is a pretty good title, you have to admit.
That is. What really does that involve on a daily basis?
Well, basically, I'm the chef of the brewery. I think that's the best way to think of it. So I like to say I am the liquid.
That's a mantra. I am the liquid.
I am
Be the liquid. Taste the liquid.
The idea of the beer, the smell, the flavor, the aroma, all the concepts behind it, the recipe, and then the equipment, the other brewers that we have working with us, their training, the quality control, everything from start to finish. So my responsibility starts with the concept of the beer, and it kind of ends with your empty glass and a smile on your face. That's the way I hope it works.
It really is a science. I guess part art, part science.
And that's what makes it interesting. Yeah. I think that, I come out of a film background, and, when I was going to school, we were learning about something that's very similar mentally. You need art and you need science to make great films. And if you have science with no art, you end up with the equivalent of industrial beer. Maybe a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. One of those things that you go to and you leave the theater and everything was perfect. The actor's teeth was perfect, the sound was perfect, the color was perfect, the picture was perfect, and that's 2 hours of your life you'll never get back because there was no plot development, you didn't care about the characters, and you said, why did I go see this movie? It was awful. And in a way, I think industrial beer has tended to be like that. It is perfect in a certain way. It has from a food quality standpoint, it does everything it's supposed to do, only the thing that it's supposed to do isn't very interesting. So you have to have both something to say and the ability to actually say it.
Yes. Now, how does one go from a film background to one of the world's leading experts on beer?
Move to England.
Really?
First lose your mind, then move to England. So I got my degree, qualified me to drive any colored cab that I wanted, and I decided to leave New York, where I was poor, and had my new degree, and be poor in London. And I was stage managing rock bands, and at the same time, I was going to the pub. And at the pub, I discovered this stuff called beer. Now, when I was in college, I thought we were drinking something called beer, and we called it beer. But what I discovered when I moved to Europe in 1983 was that beer was this whole different thing that I knew nothing about.
So England really has a style of beer making.
It has a style of beer making all its own, and then I went to Germany and found that they had a completely different type of beer making, and I went to Belgium and found what they were doing. By the time I got back a year later, it was 1984, and I had a completely different taste in beer. And I went out to the pub, and they're like the same 3 beers that there always were, that tasted exactly the same. And I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. I can't drink this stuff anymore. And I started making beer at home because I wanted to have it. To a lot of younger people, it sounds ridiculous. Like, what do you mean? It's like, no, there was no craft beer.
Now, you have judged beer as well as, brewed it. What do you look for when you taste a beer? What really are the hallmarks of a great beer?
For me, I think, balance, structure, drinkability. Within the brewing industry, I'm known for if one thing besides the books is what I call the 4-pint principle, which means that for most of our beers, I'm not talking about the big, 11% kind of things. Most of our beers, I want you to want 4 pints. When you start drinking it, I want you to say, you know what?
That's the litmus
This is
test.
Really nice. I'm going to get tucked into this. Now, maybe you shouldn't if it's like blast and it's 8%. I want you to have that reaction to it, but I also want you to know that you shouldn't have 4 pints because that might not end so well.
Indeed. So let's talk about Pittsburgh for a moment. We're here at the GoodTaste Pittsburgh event, Brew and Chew, first annual. Pittsburgh recently, I saw in an article, they said had more bars than any city in America. And that surprised me. More so than Milwaukee and things like that. So that had to, had to lift your eyebrows there. What are your thoughts and perspectives on Pittsburgh as far as a beer town?
Well, one thing I love about Pittsburgh is that, to me, Pittsburgh reminds me of Brooklyn, because it's a place that had a great past, an industrial past, a lot of immigrant population, et cetera, got kind of knocked on its butt, in the second half of the 20th century, dusted itself off, got up, and said, "We're back." And that's Brooklyn, and it's Pittsburgh. I mean, 10 years ago, literally 10 years ago, if I wanted to go to, out to where the brewery was, a cab wouldn't take me. It's like, oh, we're not going to Brooklyn. Brooklyn? No way. And when Brooklyn Brewery started, people thought we were crazy. It's like, why do you name a brewery after Brooklyn? Brooklyn's horrible. That's kind of the reputation that we have.
It's on the map for good beer now.
It's on the map. It's on the map for good beer and lots of other cool things.
Yeah.
And I think Pittsburgh's becoming very much the same kind of thing. It's like, people used to look at scans. Oh, it was Rust Belt. It was this and that. And now people's like, oh, I hear Pittsburgh's pretty cool.
And they've got an appetite for beer.
You would tell people overseas, like, oh, I live in Brooklyn. Oh, have you been shot? And so I hired a Swedish brewing team. I just like saying Swedish brewing team, by the way. Just it's like, this is my Swedish brewing team. You can easily end up using the same words over and over and over again.
Do you find yourself inventing words?
I have invented some words, definitely.
What are some Garrett Oliver terms?
Well, one word that I've made up, and it was about Sriracha Ace, is pre-sad, P-R-E-S-A-D, and that is the state of being sad in advance when you're currently happy. It's sort of like, you ever get an amazing dish in front of you and you start eating it and you're like, this is amazing, and you're already sad that it's going to be gone in 5 minutes at the same time as you're amazed by the first bite. You're like, oh my God, this is going to be over in 10 minutes. That's horrible. It's like being on vacation somewhere in the tropics and it's Thursday afternoon. You're going home on Saturday. And pre-sad. And when I have a great beer, I say, this is really great. And eventually I won't be drinking it, and that'll be terrible.